Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the chapter 26 story from the Ecce textbook. Now in this chapter you're going to be introduced to what are called demonstratives, which is a pretty straightforward new grammar concept, but it's worth reviewing, so we'll do that before we dive into the translation. But before we do that, of course, you want to make sure that you have the vocab under control. Like I always say, read through it, memorize it as best you can, make sure you're looking at some English derivatives to help you kind of associate the words and their meaning. Then you want to go through grammar, look through your textbook, feel free to watch my YouTube video, whatever kind of helps you get where you need to be, and just make sure that you understand the idea of demonstratives and how they work. And like I said, we'll do a quick review in this video too, just to make sure that you're feeling good before we go too deep into the translation. And the last thing you want to do is partner up with someone, find someone that you can read this story aloud to practice your pronunciation, your speaking skills, and then have them read the story back to you so you can work on your listening skills, right? You want to make sure that you're not cutting those two skills off when you're doing your translation, because you'd be surprised how much you retain and how much you can absorb and understand about noun endings and the word order and the meaning just by hearing it read aloud to you and by speaking it and reading it aloud yourself. So always start there. And once you've done that, you should be ready to dive in and work your way through the translation. So before we get too much into it, let's make sure that you just have a quick refresher on what the grammar was. So in chapter 26, they were teaching you, the Ecce textbook is teaching you about demonstratives, okay? So demonstratives are words that are pointing or showing something, right? It comes from the word to show or to point out in Latin, demonstrare. So these are pointing words. And if you think about it, in English, these words equate to this and these, right? This is the singular, these is the plural, and that and those. So if you had two things, let's say you were, looking at two different dogs and one is close to you and one is far away, it would be confusing if you just said, hey, look at the dog. And there's two of them. Well, which one are you talking about, right? It's easier when you have demonstratives and you can say, look at this dog or look at that dog or those dogs, right? These are pointing words because it's almost the equivalent of pointing with your finger and saying this one right here, right? This and that refer to things that are close to you and far away. So when something's close to you, you use this in English, right? It's going to be hic, haec, hoc in Latin. So this is something close to you. That is something that's far away from you. These and those are just the plural forms. That's all. So again, in Latin, you have hic, haec, hoc, which means this and these. This, in this case, they're the singular. The plural form means these. And then ille, illa, illud, which means that. And their plural forms mean those. Again, they're pointing words or showing words, right? It just helps you when you have two different things or something that you're trying to point out to someone. These words are really important in English and Latin for helping make sure that your meaning is clear and that you're understood. Demonstratives, they're more often than not, or most often, you could say, used as adjectives. So since they're adjectives, they're going to be describing nouns. They have to match the noun they're describing in case, number, and gender, just like all the adjectives you've seen so far in Latin and all the adjectives you'll ever see, right? They need to match. So there's a difference depending on the noun you're using. So for instance, if you say hic puer, that means this boy. But if I want to say this girl, it has to switch to haec puella. And if I say this building, a neuter noun, it would be hoc aedificium. So you're seeing hic, haec, hoc are the three different genders, right? In this case, they're all nominative singular, but the gender is changing. If I pluralize it, I'd say illi pueri, those boys, right? Illi puellae would be those girls. So there's a lot of different pieces to the demonstratives and different endings they use because, again, they're adjectives and they need to match in case, number, and gender. Sometimes, though, you can have demonstratives standing on their own as pronouns, right? Meaning that they're not going with a noun, they're functioning as the noun. So if you were to say hic est laetus, right, you're saying this is happy. Literally, you're saying something like this man, right? It's a masculine noun. So this person, this boy, this man, however you want to say it, is happy. If I said illa est laeta, I'm saying that, meaning that woman, because it's feminine. That person is happy. Or I could say video illud or illud video. I see that thing, right? Illud is a neuter. So when they stand on their own, you translate them the same way. It often means, depending on the gender, this man, this woman, this thing, but they don't necessarily need to be going with an adjective, right? So sometimes they're functioning as pronouns. Like I said, though, more often than not, you're going to see them as adjectives. So this is your full chart of this and that. And again, what you're seeing here is the masculine, feminine, and neuter forms, the gender, the cases, and then singular and plural, okay? One thing you'll notice is that for this, right, hic, haec, hoc, it's pretty unique. You're not really used to seeing endings like this. There's a few things that look familiar, but in general, it's pretty unique. When you go to the plural form, though, of this, you get he, hi, hike. These are using endings that look really familiar to you, right? Your noun endings. So words like he, horum, hi, harum, they're using endings that should look pretty familiar. So this will help you when it comes time to memorizing and recognizing the endings. If you can realize that for the plural form of this, you're using the endings e or me sos is and I or me sas is, it should look really familiar. For the neuter, you want to remember that these endings, when you have nominative and accusative, they're the same thing, right? So for neuter nouns, that's why you have hawk and hawk in the singular column, or hike and hike in the plural column. They're using the same thing. When you go to that, rele, ela, elud, again, it should look a little familiar in the singular. You have endings like the long I in the dative singular, o, right? These are endings that look pretty familiar. It's not an exact match to first and second declension nouns, but it's pretty close. In the plural, it's much easier to see. You have the endings e, or, me, sos, is in the masculine, I, or, me, sas, is in the feminine, and a, or, me, sa, is in the neuter. So again, there's little tricks for demonstratives in terms of the endings that'll help you with memorization. They're not as unique as you might think, or as different as you might think from nouns and adjectives that you've seen before, which is helpful. So think about that as you go through and use these. You'll catch on to the pattern, and hopefully you'll be able to recognize them easier. So now that you've got that under control, and hopefully you feel pretty good about it, again, if you need a review, go back and look at the actual textbook or my YouTube video. Feel free to look at it and just get a deeper explanation. But once you're feeling ready to go, we'll be ready to dive into this story. So again, we're going to color code it. So when you see the colors here, it's highlighting the cases. Red is going to be for the nominative, green will be for genitive, yellow for dative, blue for accusative, and that pink color for ablative. Okay, and if we run into any vocative, which we will, we'll highlight that in orange. So the story starts off with Euclides et pueri iam domum redierat. So our subject is Euclides and the boys, right? Euclides et pueri. So Euclides and the boys, remember, they had just been out looking at the city in the past couple chapters. They redierat, pluperfect, they had returned home. Iam means now. So they now had returned home is one way to say it. So they're back at the house. Then you have post canam, Cornelius et Marcus et Sextus in atrio sedebant. So after dinner, post canam, remember post always takes an accusative, which is why you have canam there. So after dinner, Cornelius, Marcus, and Sextus, sedebant, they were sitting in perfect tense. Where were they sitting? In atrio. It's ablative, in the atrium. And again, it's ablative because you're not showing any motion. They're just in the atrium, sitting down and relaxing after dinner. Then we have quid hodie vidistis pueri and quid Cornelius. So Cornelius says or asks, what did you see? Vidistis is perfect tense. You can tell by that ending istis. Remember, if you think of your perfect tense, you have e, istiet, emis, istis, erant. It's second person plural, which makes sense because the vocative is pueri. He's talking to the boys. So he's saying, what did you all see today, boys? Right? Cornelius asks. So he just wants to know what they did. Then you have nihil nisi aedificia antiqua, responded Marcus. So Marcus responded, and he says nothing, nihil, except nisi aedificia antiqua. So he's saying we didn't see anything except old buildings, right? Aedificia antiqua. They're both neuter because aedificium is a neuter noun. So this is the neuter accusative plural. What did you see? Nothing except old buildings. Then he says nos in urbem exire volumus soli, cur non licet. So Marcus says, we, nos, there's our subject, we want, volumus, right? We wanted to go out into the city, exire, right? We want to go into the city in urbem, soli, alone, by ourselves. And you'll notice that soli is it's masculine nominative plural here because it's referring to the boys, right? We would be masculine plural here and nominative, so you have soli being that. So it's saying we want to go out into the city by ourselves. We want to go alone. Cur non licet means why is that not permitted? Why is it not allowed, right? So he's saying, why won't you let us go out into the city? Then we have cui Cornelius, est periculosum sine custode exire in vias huius urbis. So to whom, Cornelius says, right? Cui is dative, meaning Cornelius says, to him, to whom is referring to Marcus. And he says, it's periculosum, it's dangerous, exire, to go out, right? It is dangerous to go out, sine custode, without a guard. It's ablative because sine takes an ablative noun. So without a guard, into the roads, vias, huius urbis. Here's our first demonstrative. You have huius is hic haec hoc. It's the genitive singular form, so it's of this city, right? It's one of those pointing words. So he says it's dangerous to go out into the roads of this city. So multi homines scelesti qui bona civium aripion. There are many wicked men, multi homines scelesti. Homines scelesti, that's our subject. Many wicked men who aripion, who grab or take bona, the goods, the stuff, civium, of citizens. It's genitive, so they steal their stuff. Then he says, nonumquam he homines cives ipsos necant. So he says, sometimes, nonumquam, these men even kill citizens, kill citizens themselves. Next, we have vobis igitur non licet sine custode exire. So it says, therefore, right, because these men are out there killing citizens, right? It says, therefore, it is not permitted, non licet, vobis, for you. Remember, non licet goes with the dative. It's not permitted for someone to do something. It's kind of the construction. So it's saying it's not permitted for you all, vobis, exire, to go out, sine custode, without a guard. Yam sero est, nunc necesse est vobis cubitum ire. So he says, yam sero est, now it's late, right? Pretty straightforward sentence. Now it's late. And he says, now it is necessary, necesse est, for you all, vobis, right? There's that dative again, to go to bed, cubitum ire. Nolite cassare sed ite statim. So he says, don't delay. Nolite cassare is our plural negative imperative, right? So a plural command, because he's talking to the two boys. That's why we have nolite with the te instead of noli. And remember, when you do noli or nolite plus the infinitive, you're making a negative command. So he says, don't delay, nolite cassare, but go immediately. Ite is another command. So he's telling them, go, right? The te again makes it plural. It's a positive command. So he says, time to go to bed. You're not going to be able to go out into the city because it's dangerous. That's really what he's getting at. Then we have pueri, labore die ide feci, simula cubitum ierunt abdormiverunt. So the boys, there's your subject, pueri, and we have this sort of side phrase, defeci, tired from the labor. Labore is ablative, so they're tired from the labor, die, of the day. There's a fifth declension noun, genitive singular. So tired from the labor of the day, they immediately went to bed, or rather you could say something like, as soon as they went to bed. Ierunt is perfect tense. As soon as they went to bed, they fell asleep. Abdormiverunt, they went to bed. Right, they went to sleep. So sort of the idea is as soon as they hit the pillow, they're sleeping. Then we have post ridie mane Marcus in lecto suo Jacebat et de circo maximo ita cogitabat. So you have this idea of on the following day, right? Post ridie, early in the morning, Marcus Jacebat, he was lying in his own bed, in lecto suo. So early in the morning, Marcus is lying in his bed, and de circo maximo ito cogitabat. He was thinking, cogitabat, about the Circus Maximus. And he was thinking these thoughts, is kind of the idea. And he says, quando circum maximum visitabimus, when, right? When will we visit? Visitabimus is future tense. When will we visit the Circus Maximus? There's your direct object. He says, cur pater meus nos exire vetat. So why is my father, pater meus is your subject, why is my father not, you could say forbidding actually, vetat is forbidding. Why is he forbidding us, nos, exire, to go out? Right? Why isn't he allowing us to go out is kind of what Marcus is getting at here as he's thinking about. He says, Harry, nullos homines scelestos in urbe vidi. So yesterday, Harry, I saw, vidi, it's perfect tense. I saw, you need a direct object, right? Nullos homines scelestos, no wicked men, is what he says. I didn't see any wicked men in urbe, in the city. So he's kind of justifying why he thinks he should be able to go out. He says, I didn't see any wicked men in the city yesterday. Inter diu certe praedones nobis non nocebon. So he says, certainly, certe, during the day, inter diu, the robbers, the praedones, right? The robbers will not, nocebunt, nocere means to harm. The bu there makes it future tense. So he's saying they will not harm or do harm to us, nobis. Nocere takes the dative here because you're really saying to do harm to someone, right? So he's saying during the day, nobody's going to harm us. Meum patrem, quod est senator Romanus, praedones timen, nihil periculi est. So he finishes his thought by saying, praedones, you have to go to get the main subject of the sentence, go to praedones, right? So the robbers, timet, they fear, meum patra, my father. So he's saying robbers fear, they're afraid of my father. Then you have this side thought, because he is a senator Romanus, because he's a Roman senator. So Marcus is kind of hiding behind his father's reputation and his father's political standing, and he's using it to justify why he should be able to go out, right? In his mind, he's saying, no one's going to bother me. My dad's a senator. They're afraid of my dad. So I'll be fine. And he says, nihil periculi est. Here's that part of genitive. Literally, it says, there is, est, nothing of danger. One way to translate it is there is no danger, is really what he's saying here. He says, there's nothing of danger, right? There's no danger. So he thinks he'd be fine due to the fact that his father is a Roman senator. And in his mind, he's using this to kind of justify why he should be able to go out without a guard. And now we continue on. We have brevi tempore, ut Marco videbator, pueri ad circum iban. So in a short time, brevi tempore, it's ablative, right? That timing element here. So in a short time, Then we have this phrase, which is a little different. It's got a passive voice verb in it, which is why they gave it to you as a separate vocab unit or vocab word in the text. Don't get too hung up on it, but it's saying as it seemed, videbator, to Marcus, right? That dative noun. So as it seemed to Marcus. So it's getting at the idea of it being a short time. So it's saying in a short time, as it seemed to Marcus, meaning he felt like it was a short time. The boys, the pueri, ebon, they were going ad circum to the circus, right? So they were on their way to the circus. So it's talking about the following day, they actually get to go. Mox molem ingentem circi maximi Marcus conspexit. So soon, right, Marcus, there's your subject, conspexit, he caught sight of, perfect tense, you can tell by the X in the middle of it. He caught sight of what? We need a direct object. It's the huge mass, the molem ingentem, the huge mass of the Circus Maximus. It's genitive, right? So he sees the giant kind of mass of this huge structure. And he says, Ecce clamavit Marcus, est circus. So look, shouted Marcus. Again, clamavit, the VIT, perfect tense. So shouted Marcus. It's the circus, or there is the circus, you could say. Cum intraverimus tandem aurigas ipsos spectabimus. So he says, when we will have entered, intraverimus is future perfect tense. So again, he's setting up two different actions in the future, intraverimus and spectabimus. By using future perfect, you're saying first you have to enter, right? First we will have entered. So it says when we will have entered, that happens first. Finally, tandem, we will see, spectabimus, we will see or we will watch the aurigas themselves, the charioteers themselves. So again, there's two actions that haven't happened yet. Entering into the circus and watching the charioteers. The future perfect tense lets you say that first you have to enter and then you're going to be able to watch. Both of these are in the future, so neither one has happened yet. Then we have subito tamen, in viam se praecipita verant tres homines. So suddenly, however, three men, tres homines, se praecipita verant, it's perfect tense, you can tell by the V and the erant ending. They hurled themselves, or rushed, you could say. Se praecipitare means to kind of, I guess, hurl yourself, literally, but it means they rushed out is kind of the idea, into the street, in viam. Cave illos homines, clamavit Sextus. So he says, Cave, watch out for those men, right? Beware those men is what Sextus shouted. Illi certe nos in domus vicinas trahent et ibi nos necabon. So Sextus comes in hot with a very kind of negative take. He says, those men, illi, right? Those people, there's our demonstrative. Those men certainly will trahent, they will drag us, nos, right? Trahent, again, is a third conjugation verb, traho, trahere, so the E in front of the NT makes it future tense. They will drag us into the house, the neighboring houses, rather. Domus is a fourth declension noun. The US ending, the long US, is accusative plural, and it's a feminine noun. You can tell because it's going with wikinas. The long AS in wikinas is also accusative, feminine plural. So he's saying they will drag us into those neighboring houses, and there they will kill us, right? So Sextus is immediately assuming the worst of these people that he sees in the street. Sed frustra, nam Marcus metu commotus, postquam sextum audivit, clamantem ad terram cacedit, et jacebat in luto immobilis. So a longer sentence, but we can figure it out. It says, but in vain, meaning it was in vain that Sextus shouted as frustra, because Marcus metu commotus. Commotus means moved, like emotionally moved. By what, right? We need an ablative. Moved by fear, metu. Postquam, so after he heard audivit, right? Perfect tense, audivit, he heard Sextus shouting, clamantem. Clamantem is technically something called a present participle, but you can just think of it as shouting here. I think they gave it to you as a vocab word. We'll learn more about it later on. But after he heard Sextus shouting, he fell, cacedit. Cacedi is the third principal part of cado cadere, which means to fall down, right? So he fell ad terram, to the earth. And jacebat, he was lying. Again, this is not throwing. This is jacere, to lie down. He was lying in the mud, in luto. And he's described as being immobilis, motionless. So Marcus, right, when he hears Sextus and he sees these men, it's sort of that fight or flight instinct. He has the flight. The flight instinct to not really fight them back or attack these men. He just kind of freezes up and he falls into the ground and he's lying there while these men are coming at him, basically. Then we have eo clamavit unus e praedonibus. So, hey, shouted one of the robbers, right? Out of the robbers. So one of them shouted, hey there, quo abis parvule. So Quo means where, right? To where is kind of the idea. So where are you going? Parwale, little one. So parwale just means it's a version of parvis, which means small. It's called the diminutive. So he's saying, hey, little one, right? That's what he's calling, in this case, Marcus and Sextus, Marcus in particular. He says, where are you going? Quid est nomen tuum? What is your name? Right? And he says, none tu filius est senatoris. And by the way, in the last line, nomen tuum is nominative here. What is your name? And he says, surely you are tu es filius. You are the son senatoris of a senator. Now, how would this person know it? The assumption here is Marcus is probably wearing his toga praetexta, which would give it away, right? If you see a young boy wearing that toga with the purple stripe, you can imagine that his father is someone important, probably a senator or some form of magistrate. But he recognizes it. He says, surely you're the son, you are the son of a senator. Then we have none nomen tuum est Marcus Cornelius. He says, surely your name is Marcus Cornelius. And now we start to get into kind of what this plot is all about. So the senator, the robber recognizes him as being the son of a senator, and he even knows his name. So something odd is happening here. He says, aren't you Marcus Cornelius? Cui Marcus, quid vultus scelesti? So to whom, Marcus says, cui again is dative, means to whom. And then the implied phrase here, or verb here, is he said. So Marcus said, quid vultus scelesti? What do you want? Scelesti here is vocative, wicked ones, right? It's plural. So what do you want, wicked men? Nihil pecuniae habeo. He says, I have, habeo, nihil pecuniae. Again, it's another partitive genitive. I have no money, literally nothing of money. So he says, I have no money. Nolite me verberare. Here we have that negative command, and it's plural. So he's telling a group of people, in this case, the scelesti, the men, don't beat me, right? Me verberare, don't hit me or don't beat me. He says, I have no money. Don't attack me. It's kind of what he's getting at. Si mihi nacueritus, pater meus certe vos punie. So he says, if, and again, here we go with two different actions in the future. So he starts with the future perfect. If nocueritus, if you will have done harm, mihi, to me. So he's basically saying, if you will harm me, my father, pater meus, certainly will punish. Puniet is punire, right, which means to punish, fourth conjugation verb. The E is giving it away as being future tense. He says, certainly my father will punish you. So he warns them. He says, if you will have done this, my father will do that. He's saying, if you touch me, my father is going to punish you. Which was his whole point earlier in the story. He was saying robbers are afraid of my father. Now we're going to see that isn't entirely correct here. So you've said interpellave, prido. So, but the robber interrupted, and he says, take puer, be quiet, or shut up, boy, right? Be quiet, boy. Take is the imperative, right? A singular positive imperative. Be quiet. He says, tu es captivus noster, neque ad patrem redibus. So he says, you are, tu es, captivus noster, our captive. Right? He says, you're our prisoner, basically, our captive. And redibus, you will not return ad patrem, to your father. So he says, you're not going to go back to your father. You're our captive. We don't care who your father is basically what he's getting at. He says, nemo nunc poteret te servare. So nobody now, nunc, so no one now will be able, poteret is future tense of posse, to be able. So he says, no one will be able to save, servare, te, you. So he says, no one will be able to save you. Ipse enim te necabo. So he says, I myself, necabo means I will kill. Ipse is the intensifier. It means like myself here. So he's saying, I myself will kill te, you. Enim just means like for, is kind of the idea here. So he says, for I myself will kill you. So no one's going to be able to save you because I'm going to kill you, is really what he's saying. Tum prido gladium strinx it. So then the robber strinks it. He drew, meaning he kind of took out. The X gives it away as being perfect tense. He drew his sword, his gladius, right? So he takes out his sword. Sextus stabat perteritus et fer auxilium clamavit. So Sextus was standing, stabat, terrified, perteritus, frightened. And he shouted, clamavit, fer auxilium. Fer is the singular positive imperative. It means bring, right? It's from ferre. So he says, bring help, fer auxilium, fer auxilium. Said nemo clamorem audivit, but nobody heard audivit, the shout, clamorem. So the idea here is Sextus is standing there terrified. Marcus had just fallen into the ground. Now the men, the robbers are saying, we don't care who your father is. I'm going to kill you. And Sextus starts to shout, bring help, bring help. He's just looking for someone to help them. Then we have nemo auxilium tulit. Nobody brought. Tulit is from tuli, which comes from ferre, same verb that Sextus used before when he said fer auxilium. But in this case, it's perfect tense. So it's nobody brought auxilium, help. Marcus oculos clausit et mortem expectabat. So Marcus is your subject. He clausit, he closed. It's the third principal part of claudo, right? Claudo, right, to close. So it says he closed his eyes, oculos, and expectabat, he was waiting for, or he was expecting, you could say, he was waiting for mortem, death. So Marcus assumes, he closes his eyes and he assumes this is it, they're going to kill me. So kind of a dramatic and intense story here. Then we have nihil accedit, which you might have already guessed, right? Nothing happened. Oculus aperuit, so he opened his eyes. In lecto erat suo, he was erat in lecto suo, in his own bed, right? He'd been dreaming, which you probably guessed from the details in the story. So he was in his own bed. Somnium modo fuerat. It had been, again, fuerat is pluperfect tense. You can tell by, it's the third principal part of the verb esse, fui, with erat attached. So it had been only modo a somnium, a dream, right? It had only been a dream. Hodie tamen domi manere constituit Marcus. So it says, today, however, Marcus decided, constituit, to stay home, manere domi, to stay at home. So he decided not to go out. He didn't want to go into the city anymore. And it ends on that line. You have exire noluit. He did not want to go out. So again, this story, apart from being incredibly dramatic and kind of out of left field, right, from Ecce, it's really getting at the idea of the demonstratives. There's not a ton of them in here, but there are a few that show up, and it's repeating what you've been learning about different tenses, pluperfect, future perfect, all the different things we've seen in the past couple chapters, fourth and fifth declension nouns. They show up in this chapter. So hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming. It's a longer story, but it's nothing that you can't handle. And again, you just want to take it one piece at a time, work your way through, and just keep practicing your translation skills, which you do in every one of these videos. And if you keep doing that and keep practicing, you will be just fine. If you have any questions at all on how we translated anything, or you have questions on how I did it, just let me know. Feel free to put a comment. I'll help you however I can. Otherwise, just keep practicing, keep reading the Latin, and hopefully you're feeling better and better with every chapter that goes by.